Recording in progress.
And I think maybe a couple of people have to go on mute. Okay, so welcome to the AU Patient Summary call. Appreciate you joining us on a Friday morning. I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country and that we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands in which we're all gathering today. For me, that's the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara peoples. And we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend our respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. We acknowledge the First Peoples as the first scientists, educators and healers. So today's agenda, there'll be some usual business and updates with approval of minutes, which is going to be postponed. And then we're going to do a ballot update. We're going to be having a little 10-minute ballot update kind of section while our ballot for comment is still progressing. So that's going to be a standing item now through to probably mid-November is probably when we'll finish all of that and publish. That's the hope anyway. For decisions today, we've got a decision on whether or not we want to publish a updated draft specification, and Dusha will take us through that. It's been advertised on Zulip that this was a possible decision out of this call. And the reason for that is we had a deadline for publishing the ballot snapshots that we met, but that was prior to the IPS project finishing their ballot voting on what changes they would make. They've since made a number of changes, some of which are around cardinality. So they are normative. We've pulled together a branch of what that would look like. And we can decide today if we think we would like to actually release that so that the connectathon testing can be done on the fully aligned snapshot rather than the one that is out for ballot for comment. There's a little bit of difference there. Dusha will walk through that, and then it's up to us in this call to decide if we want to publish that. The other thing we're going to go through today is talk about testing scenarios and what we really want to focus on in the upcoming Connectathon, which is really close now, and Heath will take us through and get some of that feedback from people on the line on how we want to shape that and what we want to focus on, because then we'll take that through in the Connectathon. And then in the next call, we'll report back on some of the things that we found or how is that working. And then if we have time, we haven't finished our composition walkthrough, which has kind of changed nature now that we've got our obligations in. So that was also on the agenda for today, is to really walk through what the AU Patient Summary composition profile has in it, how to read it, and also to maybe call out some things that we might want to consider changing through the ballot for comment. So that's the proposed agenda today. Is there anything else that people want to add on to this agenda? All right, I'm not hearing anything. So let's move forward then through the usual business. First bit we usually do is approval of minutes. That's postponed. The minutes from the last call haven't been sent out yet. The main reason for that is around publication activities. So this is just on me that I've not actually pulled those together completely yet. Our wonderful scribe Shelley has provided them, but I've not emailed them out. I plan to do that today. And we've postponed that because they have a summary of our last call, which was largely an information session around balloting rather than any voting that was undertaken. Updates and news. So we are still coming into this Connectathon. So even if it's last minute and you're like, oh, I'm going to be here on the 1st to 2nd of September, and by here I mean Brisbane, but you don't yet have a ticket, you can email events@hl7.com.au to see if they're to go on the wait list. And if you can't make it to that event and you're lucky enough to have tickets, please email events@hl7.com.au so they can release those tickets. There are people on the wait list. Okay. updates on IPS 200. So the voting has been completed on IPS. And in fact, what I might do is, we might even put it in the chat. Do I have it open? I'm sure I've got it somewhere. There's a dashboard for IPS. I'll just put that in the chat. There we go. And so all the block voting on 13 and on 12 is all done. New issues come in all the time. These two aren't about the IPS 200 content. And so all of that kind of decision making has been done, and the majority of the content in IPS is now in the CI build, and that's been updated here. I see, Ilya, that you've posted that the meeting link is incorrect in Zulip. Have you posted a correction?
Not yet, but I am doing it right now.
All right. Yep, that'd be great if you could put in the correct link in here. I have no idea what that's for then. Or is that on our meeting minutes? AU patient summary meeting minutes. Ah, it'll be this one, I presume. That should be right. Hopefully, Ilya, tell me if that's right or if I've just posted something incorrect again.
This is a correct one. All good.
Fantastic. Thank you. Apologies, everyone, that I copied that from. That's a good question. I don't know where I got that from. I'll have to go through all our different calendars to make sure that that link is correct. Right, okay, so IPS 200 is fast on the way to being published. The intention still for that is September. It's post our Connectathon deadline, but they're going for publication approval on the 4th of September. Where it's at right now is it is out for community review. So there is a draft out for review. It was announced in Zulip that says we've finished all our reconciliation. Here is the draft. Please review it. And if you have any further issues with this, there's also then some follow-up information on how to raise that with them, because we are rapidly approaching the end of this. So just FYI for those people on the line who are interested to, or are also have maybe thoughts around some of what's in AU Patient Summary, and the source of that is IPS. We need to be providing feedback through this community feedback review. And I'll just put a link in the chat to that. That's the Zulip topic, announcing that this is open and how to provide feedback. Okay, next update. So this is our ballot update. I'm going in here to the standing page. Put that in the link. This is our standing page. Every single ballot has one. There's a ballot reconciliation area on Confluence now, which has like base and core and e-requesting and patient summary there. And every single ballot will have a couple of pages. One will be a kept up to date, as reasonable as possible. So at least weekly, if not more frequently, a set of information on how many votes are coming in, like how many issues, where people are voting, where we are at in terms of actually completion and progressing through this, through the triage stage. Reconciliation is voting in this calls. And then applied is whether or not the IG editors have actually applied the agreed changes. So we want to track all of that through to 100% eventually. It also has all the different votes that are coming up. So it'll have the date, and whether it's an electronic vote and how you vote. So I would strongly recommend that people watch this page if you are planning to participate in the decisions we're going to be making around patient summary. The link is in the chat, and you can add yourself as a watcher through Confluence if you log in. Otherwise, I can say that so far we've had some votes. So 18 people have voted on the ballot for comment for patient summary. 12 have voted affirmative. 6 are currently abstaining. So there's still 40 to cast a vote. And we currently have 7 pieces of feedback, some of which will come to our next call to start to work through whether or not we make any changes in response to those pieces of feedback. So that's next call, but this is where we are now. I'll also point out on this page on the right, there's the information on overview of the ballot process. So there's a little video here, which is a recording of last week, and also links off to the H27 ballot voting. And then there's this link here, which is the JIRA ballot definition. So this is the real-time tracker of how many votes are there, who are the different voters, if you want to know who's voting, and what their different votes actually are and why, is all off that link. Okay, so that's everything about that page. Are there any questions about that page actually before I move on, or about ballot for comment? All right. Lastly, we have one action out of the last meeting, which was for Brett to send out invites, like calendar invites, to the registered ballot voters for the voting seminar, and that was done. So that's it. That's complete now. All right. Before I move on to the next one, which is about, I think, which is about the changes and whether or not we're going to release a new patient summary snapshot. Are there any other updates or news that people want to talk about? Okay, so at this point, and I've clicked on something, I'm going to hand over to you, Dushi. Did you want to share your screen, or do you want to just tell me to move slide?
Sorry. Yeah, you can just move slides if that's all right.
Sure.
All right. So we've made sorry, I'll start again. As Danielle stated, we made some changes in the current build in AU Patient Summary to reconcile with the latest changes from the IPS. So this just lists the context for the changes. These are the IPS votes that didn't quite make it into the ballot version of AU Patient Summary. I don't think we need to go through all of this, Danielle, do we? Or shall we look quickly?
Sorry, I was on mute. No, I don't think so.
Sorry.
I guess
Yeah.
well, hang on. My understanding is you're actually about to walk through the changes. So I don't think people need a double up if there was a JIRA and then this.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Mhm.
okay, cool. I think there's
All right.
also, which isn't here, there's a couple of QA fixes that were made as well.
Yes.
Okay, so do you want me to go next slide?
Yes, please. All right. So one of the APS votes was to remove display obligation on sorry, let me just have a look. So this change is to remove should display obligation on the AUPS consumers on allergy intolerance patient reference. And this comes from the IPS change to remove obligations, display obligations from technical elements. So the patient reference or the subject reference in other profiles is really a technical element, and there's no requirement to display that to the users. So IPS made a change to do this, to remove from all patient references elements, and we made the subsequent change in our profile. So this change will apply to allergy intolerance. It also applies to the patient reference or the subject reference in composition profile, condition profile, AUPS immunization, AUPS medication reference. And if you go to the next change, it also applies to all other medication statement, pathology result observation, procedure, and smoking status. So going to the AU patient summary composition, there was a change in IPS that they require section code elements to be mandatory on all section slices. So they have changed code cardinality from 0 to 1 to 1 to 1 in the section all slices code. We've now made that change as well. And we added must support and shall handle obligation for the AUPS consumer. So that change propagates to all slices in the composition. The next one is to remove use of codable concept, IPS data type on composition section code. Let me just open that, sorry.
Richard?
Sorry, yep, Richard.
I think it would be easier for us to follow this if what you displayed was the hierarchy, from the key elements table or something or other, so that you read through this and then point to
So
which part.
If you look at the
I mean,
profile, and I can just point out what's
Noting.
changed in the profile.
I mean, that's what I'm doing myself, but I think it might be easier to do that if you're in a position to do that at the moment.
I think we can. I think we could. I guess it depends on. I don't know how much detail we need to go in to.
Maybe I can just
beyond summarizing these changes and going, do we want a new branch? Like, oh, hang on. Why is that on that branch? We just need wrong links. Right. And again, Jushi, if it's easier for you to share your screen so that you can like scroll and all that kind of thing.
Maybe I think
work.
it will be easier for me to change to share. Yes,
right.
and then I'll just point to the changes, and all the changes is pointing at are coming from the IPS. Yeah. All right. Let me just share.
All right, I've stopped sharing. You should be right. I think some of them also you can just talk about, and then this applies everywhere.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so share. I am sharing now. Please let me know if you can't see it for some reason.
I can see your screen.
All right. Okay, so I'll go to the composition. Do I need to make it a little bit bigger?
Yes, definitely for me.
Yeah, is this better now? Oops.
Yeah, that's better for me.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I'll start again. So we're going with the composition. There's a few changes in the slices, all slices for the section. So the changes that we just mentioned is making the code mandatory. So it's 1-to-1 now, and it has a shell handle obligation for a UPS consumer. The next, and that change propagates to all section codes in the fine slices as well. So we have, actually, am I displaying? Did we miss one? No, it's there. So we have in the section problems, we have a code is mandatory as it was, and we have a shell handle obligation for the consumer. The next change is extension section note that's on all slices is now 1-to-many. That's a change from 0-to-many, and that's a change from 0-to-1 in the ballot version. There's been removal on some obligations on technical elements, like we removed obligations on, sorry for the scrolling, on composition identifier, composition type, and composition section subject reference, as we said, have now removed should display obligation for the consumer. So identifier, type, and subject reference don't have a shall display obligation should display obligation on the consumer anymore. The next change is that in the section slice for all sections, section title, sorry, I'll slide to that, section title and section text have obligations for the producer changed from shall populative known to shall populate. So this used to be shall populative known. It's now shall populate on title and text. We also made a QA change.
Excuse me, is the idea of
Mhm.
that the person that the system that creates it, if it doesn't have one available, it will create one?
No, it does. It is not.
It's that if
do you want to go to the change log and pull up the JIRA? The JIRA has a really nice summary of why that change is. It's the combination of able to populate and populate if known. So it was mandatory anyway. Something has to be filled out.
Yeah.
And there's two slightly orthogonal but overlapping concepts that there is an expectation systems are capable of doing this. You have to build in the capability. And then if you know it, you have to populate it. You can still do data absent reason or I don't know this. That's okay. But it's mandatory. So something has to be filled out in FHIR. And from IPS's perspective, there's an expectation that systems have the capability to have this data in the first place.
So providing a data absent reason satisfies shall populate.
Yes, it does, because
Okay,
humans
thank you.
actually have it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's clear enough to me now. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Going back to the composition, and I'll just go back to show you one more change. So this is a purely QA change in the plan of care section. One of the sliced entries had immunization recommendation profile, but that wasn't in the list of allowed targets for the entry. So we've added immunization recommendation as allowed resource for this target for this reference. So that's the only other change in the composition. Then we have.
Hi everyone, I'm new to your group and thank you for having me. I believe that this is a Medicare, as a discharge summary sort of template. And you mentioned about, and I'm kind of getting my head around because it's just my first time coming in. Is there any sections, just I couldn't find it, for pathology results? And kind of identification for any alerts, such as isolation alerts.
There are, if you want to put the,
Mhm.
so it's called results.
Results, yes.
Now, this isn't a great fit yet for discharge summary. I think it's one of the ongoing topics.
Okay.
There's massive overlap, but for example, it doesn't have any of the like encounter information you'd expect on like disposition or like the actual like admission kind of times. It's a pretty, I guess, vanilla kind of summary, but it does
Okay.
have, and she's popped that on screen where you would see results.
Yeah, I think the whole results might be overwhelming to have in the actual summary, but the highlights of it and some alerts, such as, for example, multi-resistance, MRSAs, VREs, or any other alerts that could say in the summary, where other stakeholders won't be affected by not knowing, because I actually in the field find out that you have to search through the medical history to find, oh my God, this person is such and such, and you didn't know. So
now, do you want to pop to Dushi the alerts section? There is a section for alerts.
Okay.
The concept of patient summary as this is more of an abstract data model in an implementation sense. So it's intended to be expansive enough to cover multiple use cases. And the idea is actually the summary is targeted to the scope, and it's up to the clinical information system to be saying, I'm actually giving you a summary about one event, or I'm giving it to you over this period of time, or it's focused for this particular disease, or it's focused for something else in particular. And we're kind of, I guess in this group, we're defining the technical specifications, but leaving it up to clinical information systems with like the best practice guidelines and so forth to decide how do they populate it. Is it with just like the last 2 years of relevant results, or going to your particular statement around what would best work for your context? And we're leaving that up to the systems.
Beautiful. It's just for sustainability, as I'm getting my head around understanding nationally and internationally what these concepts fit in together, because you want to build something that you don't have to change all the time, and something that it's just a note. And as I said, I am not at all kind of close to your expertise. My voice is shaking because I believe I'm talking to many amazing people out there. But just for the things that I have come across and of experience as well. For example, in the previous neighborhood, I had someone in the neighborhood that the council sent out emails, as in letters, that this person had a stoma, and they had an infection in the stoma, and they have been disposing of their waste incorrectly, and that would have caused a harm towards, and this is basically a health sector, to others. So kind of having these information in the summary that would alert others, that would get that summary to be putting measures in as kind of an alert, because sometimes the person doesn't know what they need because with literacy, whatever. So I just thought, this came to my mind out of the blue, and I'm sorry I'm holding up your meeting. I just couldn't find anything in that. But if you have the alerts, and then it's fine, I guess. But just to keep a note on, and I will just mute back.
That's really great. And please do speak up around asking questions around how would this information that I think is important work in this space. That's part of what we're trying to discuss. So that sometimes, we're doing really specific questions, but generally we want to make sure that we can have the discussions where anyone has questions on, how do I implement this, or how does the information sit, whether you're coming from a clinical background or you are actually representing a consumer space, or you're more in a vendor implementation. All of that kind of question is amazing. So please keep asking things, and I appreciate what you've raised today. And Marvin, you've had your hand up, sorry.
Yeah, listen, in just a response to Mandy's query, I posted a link to the IPS, a kind of a pictorial view of what's in the IPS, because sometimes it can be hard to navigate when we're looking at these structures on the screen at the moment. It can be a bit hard to understand what's included in the IPS. So that link that I put there, which just gives that pictorial view of what the required sections are, the recommended sections, and optional sections.
And I'll also
Just
keep
so
in
that you can
mind.
start to get a view, and then you can start to drill down.
Sorry, Marvin, I spoke over you. I thought you were finished. It broke up. Also, it's extensible as well. So if you've got it, we're not limited to these sections as well. And as the scope of the IPS in particular is stated that I copied in there, it's not limited to that unplanned cross-border scenario, but as well. So discharge summary is potentially something that you could do, but it's not what the ISO standard is about, which is about the unplanned cross-border care. So it does have extensibility, so you can add your own sections for those other use cases.
All right, thanks, Mandy, Marvin, and Heath. I think back to you, Dushi. And I think maybe you finished talking about the composition.
Yes, we are done with the composition. I think
Okay.
there's 2 more changes to cover. One is systematic change through the IPS, where the IPS typed some of the elements that were codable concept to the IPS profile of codable concept, where these elements weren't flagged as must support, which we also had in the ballot version of the AUPS. Now they've decided now to, where an element is not flagged as must support, remove the profiling of the type to their own IPS codable concept type. So that applies to a number of elements in the IG. I will just show you one. So in the condition profile, actually, I'll go to the snapshot. So there's a body site element that's a type codable concept that it's not a must support element. It used to be typed to a codable concept IPS. That's now been removed. So we've removed the type of the codable concept IPS, and this applies to other profiles as well. So I'll just show
And thanks, Dushi.
another
We
one.
just have Heath, who has his hand up.
Just to
Okay.
quickly elaborate on that, basically the rule for do we use the IPS one or not is that if it's must support, we use the IPS profile for codable concept. Otherwise, if it's not must support, then we just we don't constrain it further. So that's why Dushi had to go to the snapshot to actually see those examples, is because they're no longer showing up as key elements because they're not must support.
Yeah. And another one is site and route. They used to be codable concept IPS, but they're not must support elements. So we've just removed that constraint now, and yeah. So this applies to other profiles. So we had changes in immunization. We had changes in medication statement, pathology result observation, procedure, and smoking status. I don't think I need to go through all of those profiles. It's just a systematic rule now. And I think this leaves just one more change in the medication request profile. I'll go to the diff. There's a do not perform element that IPS is now set the pattern to false. What this means, if the pattern is set to true, it means it's prohibiting this action. It means do not order or do not prescribe this medication. That use case is now constrained out, so we've got the pattern set to false. And that's all with the changes that are coming from the IPS.
Just wanted
we
to add
did-
a clarification on the do not perform. So it remains optional. And it is optional. You don't have to include it. It's not must support because it's not expected. And IPS is now clarified through like a machine processable rule that required pattern false, that there is no expectation that you would be trying to provide actionable instructions of do not administer or order this medication to a patient through a patient summary. So that is why that's there. It's still optional. We don't expect it, but they're saying that if you happen to have a do not perform, we are expecting that this is true if it's going to be there, rather than and actually, sorry, we expect this is false rather than a true, because this isn't about providing actionable directions to people who are like administering or supplying medications.
Daniel, a further
Yes.
clarification on that is that the IPS has indicated that if there are any medications requests that needs to be flagged with do not perform, it should go into sections like alert.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Stephen. And I don't know if you're happy to take this action, but I think, because I know that you've been a great advocate of being really clear on this, I think it would be really good if we added some profile-specific implementation guidance, or maybe even some guidance overall on that in our specification. I think we've missed the window on IPS, but we could do it here.
Yeah, I think that's my thought as well, and I think it will be useful.
And Brett, your hand is up.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a hole that's a bit dangerous because people could populate it and not display or not be used. So yeah, I think we need to have some thing to support what to do.
Yeah, and that's another concern of my, Brett, and I had extensive discussions with the two co-leads of IPS, both at the workgroup meeting and also outside the workgroup meeting during conference calls. I think we do. This is one of the reasons why I'm a bit obsessed about the medication requests profiles and do not perform, is that this has very important clinical safety implications. And it'd be useful for us to have some clear guidance on sort of like how to use it, and in particularly with reference to the do not support bullet.
Yeah, I think
do not perform bullet.
Yeah, I think there's a case to even exclude it from the profile, so it can't be done. But we'll.
That's actually a pretty good suggestion, to be honest. But yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
On this one, if you look at the description for do not perform, in effect, the default value is false. And so as in effect, the default value is false, this is basically doing the same thing as saying don't send it. But it's saying if you do send it, the only thing you're allowed to say is false, which is the same meaning as not sending it. So I think this is actually better than excluding the element. Because it's the least restrictive way with still the same amount of meaning.
I think someone needs to go on. Yeah.
But Richard, if you do populate it with true, there's no obligation for anyone to do anything with it. Right? No, and you may not even see it.
But it's actually invalid in that case.
It's invalid. See, we've said it's a required value false. So we've said the only thing you're allowed to say is the positive value that means the same thing as not saying anything.
No, I missed it. Yep. No. Yeah. Good.
So this is the weakest way of saying you can only issue positive medication requests. You are allowed to say do not perform false, and you're allowed to not say it. And if you don't say it, they mean the same thing.
I'll take it back. I think this is fine. Cool. Thanks.
No, Richard, I take it a bit differently. If you do not say it, it might not necessarily mean the same thing.
Oh no, it does. I'm pretty sure if we go to it, there's a snapshot
Default,
rule. I
yeah.
think there's a meaning when missing
Yeah.
for the element definition that does that, Stephen, on this one in
Okay,
particular.
yeah, right.
But yeah, it doesn't always do that, but I think this one has that definition.
I'm actually happy with this answer. I
Oh,
think it's
hey.
good.
Hey, Joe. Everyone's dressed up. Ellie's a astronaut.
I think, sorry, Francis, I'm just going to put you on mute. All right. Okay, so great. So that's the set of changes. So there's actually been quite a few. And so we put to this group and there's been some editorial changes as well with a couple of spelling mistakes fixed on, would you like a new release? Would anyone like to motion publishing these changes as a 040 and we take that to the connectathon?
For that, Danielle, I have a question, and apologies if this has been addressed in a previous meeting, but I understand there are now obligations in the International IPS spec. I just want to know whether those obligations and the relevant actors are now harmonized between AU
Yes.
Patient Summary and IPS.
100%.
They are. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, we've been bringing that in, and some of the changes, in fact, I think about 30% of the changes between the 030 comment and if we release a new one are the obligation change for the corresponding actors, which has strengthened some obligations and removed others. Yeah, but yes, we would be, to our knowledge, if we publish today, fully aligned with the IPS reconciliation.
Splendid. Thank you.
Which I guess brings it back. And if you want to stop sharing, Dushy, I guess oh no, Heath, your hand is up.
I guess to summarize my perspective on what it actually means for the connectathon for those that are actually going to be effectively validating instances, the key changes from a validation perspective are those on the composition, where we've changed things like code to 1-to-1. And I think that's about it, actually. I think it's the only cardinality change that actually has a validate, and this do not perform on medication request.
Yeah.
Everything else are obligation changes, which don't really have any significant impact.
Not if you
on a
call dollar
validator.
validate. Yeah, if you call dollar validate, there are only composition changes, and then there's, as you said, medication request changes that we would expect. Yeah.
And section note I see has gone from 0-to-1 to 0-to-many. So that's the
Exactly.
other cardinality change. So I think there's really only 3 changes that actually impacts a validation.
So the question to this group is, would you like, and is someone happy to motion publication of a 040 draft to take to the connectathon?
I'll propose it, Richard.
All right, Richard, I'll go for a second and then I'll address your raised hand landed. Is there a seconder of that motion?
Well, actually, I'm happy to second, given you have time to perform these changes, was my only question.
Yeah, the changes are available. We can publish today.
Perfect. I second that.
Just a question on, do you want it? If you do, we can do that. Yeah.
Definitely would like to validate against it. So yes, please. I'm happy to second.
Okay, so we have a motion or a second. There's also a question in the chat, Sanjeev, which I think is actually more on the implementer side rather than the IG author side. So in terms of, we have a publication branch ready to go to be published today. I guess there is that question, Sanjeet, if you wanted to raise that to the group on whether or not there's a concern for people trying to pick this up for the September Connectathon on 1 to 2.
Well, if I understand the question, if I can attempt to answer, with this new release, there will be a new package generated that we would then be leveraging in the validator for the Connectathon. So I don't, that's really going to be, we can basically download that new package that's generated and use that in the validator to do this validation. So I don't see there's any problem there that if you're ready to go, Danielle.
Right. Sanjeet, was that a accurate summary of your statement, or did you want to raise any other comments for the group?
Maybe he said the same thing, but I think my question from a vendor point of view, where we have to come prepared for the Connectathon and these changes that we are pushing today, hopefully, would we have sufficient time to come prepared and be?
So you're actually asking from a vendor perspective, not from the validation of what is produced by the vendor perspective.
I'm focusing more on the Connectathon.
Yeah. So is your concern about the vendors being ready with these changes, or the ability for us to validate what the vendors produce?
It's more about vendor being ready.
Okay, sorry, I misinterpreted your question then.
I think it's a valid question. I think we've got some comments from people on the line that it would be good to have this option to validate against anyway, because I guess that's true. These are permanent changes, so they are coming in whether we want it or not, because we need to be compliant to IPS.
And I guess even if you come to the ballot to the Connectathon and it fails on validation, it doesn't really matter. It's just you've got in your backlog to do.
Yeah, I think it's probably good. We could have both packages available, I guess, and then what people are prepared to or have prepared and have available is what is being brought to the Connectathon, and that could surface, I guess, some of the really interesting things about how meaningful have these changes been.
Personally, I think they're what we assumed anyway. Like if we talk about the section code, we assumed it was mandatory, but it wasn't actually well, it should have been mandatory. I'll put it that way. It was mainly for, I guess it's because it's on all slices, it's those sections that have not been defined that will now have a mandatory code. Whereas the sections that are defined in the specification are already mandatory because we put required requirements on them. So I think it's really for a very small scenario where you're making up your own section.
Okay, thanks, Heath. Are there any other questions or comments before we move to a vote? Okay, I'm going to launch an electronic vote for the current motion, which is to publish a 040 draft with the changes that we've just walked through. If you don't have access to the chat, if you can't see the electronic vote, you can put in the chat a +1 for affirmative or negative or abstain. And if you don't have access to that because you've dialed in via phone, you can say your name and whether you are affirmative, negative, or abstain. Now, we're only at 70%, so I do need more people to vote before we will close this. Okay, I'm going to close this down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I will end that poll and share the results. So we have, including the result in the chat, 23 affirmative, 0 negative, and 5 abstain. For those of you who are new to this call, I think what you're seeing are just percentages. As the host of this Zoom call, I get to see the numbers, and that's what I'm reading out for the purposes of the minutes. So that motion is carried. We will publish a 040 today. Now, quick question to Dushi. Is there anything else we need to do, or can we give the green light to Brett as the HL7AU publication manager to just go ahead, please?
There's nothing else. I've just pushed the latest changes. So when the build is
Fantastic.
done, Brett could go ahead. Yeah.
Brett, please work with Kyle and get that out as soon as possible.
Kachik, there is a branch here.
There is a branch.
Yeah, cool.
Absolutely. There's
I'll-
a branch with a
Thanks.
publication request.
Thank
I'll
you.
message you with details, Brett.
Thank you. Cool.
Okay, let's move on. Next part of today's meeting is about the connectathon, and specifically about the testing scenarios. And this will be taken through with Heath. Heath, did you want to share your screen, or do you want me to just like move to next slide as you tell me?
Yeah, no, let you go.
All right.
Okay, so for those that don't know, we do have our HL7 Australia FHIR Connectathon coming up in just over a week's time on 1st of September and 1st and 2nd of September in Brisbane in the Telstra Health building. Next slide. So at that Connectathon, there are multiple streams or tracks, and there are two of particular interest to this group. AU Core, which is obviously our parent TDG, is running a separate track this time to the AU Patient Summary track. So the AU Patient Summary track in particular is intended to allow participants to demonstrate the use of AU Patient Summary Implementation Guide by generating, sharing, and viewing patient summaries. So we've got 3 track leads. Other than myself, as a Spark FHIR facilitator, we've got Landon Riley from Best Practice Software and Tim Panahol from the Digital Agency, who are co-chairs of the AU Core TDG there. So as part of the goals of the track, we're basically allowing our implementers to produce and validate those patient summaries, hence why the previous discussion was important for us to get through. What is it that we're actually going to be validating against? And also not just validating what you're producing against the implementation guide, but it's a real opportunity for us to start sharing those documents with other systems that can consume those documents. So that to really go into proper implementation experience, and then from an AU Core or a patient summary group perspective, we need to start collecting coverage of all of the patient summary profiles that are supported by the various participant systems, both in a producer role as well as a consumer role. So that will be utilized to help us move forward with our maturity models. This particular meeting isn't overly important, but we just want to start that process. We do have another connectathon in December where that will be our final collection prior to setting our actual maturity models for it to be published in the following year. So it's really starting that collection of the coverage of that. So if you, as a vendor that you're producing, we're going to be recording which particular profiles such as allergies, conditions, alerts, etc., that you're actually producing in your system. Whether it's valid or not, we're not worried about that. It's more the fact that you've implemented and covering that. We're also looking to explore and share experience around the generation process. How are you generating it? How are you initiating that? And also how other consuming systems might access that patient summary. And we also have a breakout session that we're going to discuss some hot topics around implementing AU patient summary. And we've got a couple of topics in mind, again, around how we are want to look at generation and access of those patient summaries going forward so that we can start getting some guidance for the implementers on how that's going to be done nationally. Secondly, we've also got this contention between IPS and AUPS and how they work together. When I say contention, AUPS is based on IPS, obviously, but AUPS also further constrains them. So what's the impact of our constraints that we've applied here in AUPS if we're sending a patient summary to a system that is overseas and implements IPS, and vice versa? If we receive an IPS from a system that is IPS compliant, but not necessarily AUPS compliant, what's the impact? How do we manage that? So there are a couple of topics we've got. We actually got a track kickoff call on Monday at 11 o'clock Eastern time. So there's a Zoom call there, and there's a link to the patient summary track page down the bottom there if you want to go and check that out in more detail. On the next slide. So in the track page, we've got a couple of proposed scenarios that we want to run through for implementers. We are a little bit liberal on what we want to achieve, but more so that we're actually interested in what implementers or the industry want to test. So we've got 3 that we're proposing at the moment. One which is a patient summary producer as a server generating a patient summary. A patient summary producer as an application that generates an AU patient summary, and there's suggestion that we might be application might be retrieving existing data from a FHIR server and then compiling it into a patient summary. And then the other one is for consumers. So how do we locate patient summaries? How do we retrieve them? And we're looking to get feedback on all of those topics around how did you as an implementer initiate the generation of the patient summary? How did you initiate sharing it, locating it, retrieving it, etc.? If you're interested in participating, we've got the sign up or participant system details down the bottom. So what I wanted to just talk about in this group as a group of people that have been actively involved in producing these specifications is, are there any other track scenarios? Perhaps just move forward slightly on that. Thank you. So other track scenarios, sorry, back on that, other than these 3 that were put forward, so that we perhaps can update the track page with additional scenarios, or is this enough at this point in time for this particular connectathon?
I've lost my react, so my hand is up. And since no one else is, I'll speak. I'm really interested in specifics from the group, because I know there's a whole bunch of people who are actually implementing. And I think I'm really appreciative of the kind of agnostic overall scenarios. But I kind of also want to know where people are at in implementation. If there's something in specific that we're trying to actually ask, can people come to this and test out whether this works for you? I think we had a really great testing event in June, where a whole number of people went and interfaced with what the agency was doing, which is a little bit different to what had been done previously around a named query, that I thought was really interesting to test through. And if anyone is doing anything in particular and is bringing that here, I think we could actually like form that up and put out a call to the people who are going so that people are prepared for that. Sorry, David, your hand is up.
Yeah, I guess what I was thinking was that given the breadth of patient summary in the Connectathon, are people looking at certain sections more so than other sections? Are there certain combinations that reflect, I guess, certain scenarios that health professionals are looking at?
It's actually a really interesting point of view, because I guess these scenarios are thinking more around, how do we just generally generate and share and exchange? But you're actually talking about driving more into the profiles, and so that's interesting, David. And again, with Mandy's comments earlier about, how does this work around for discharge summaries, for example? Is it useful in the context of a discharge summary or any other specific use case summary?
Because I guess the most complete set might be if I was going to a new GP. Here's, mate, here's my history. There you go. Or otherwise, why else am I asking for one?
Do we want to do a Menti survey at the Connectathon and ask people which sections they're implementing and just get some of that feedback back?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Or do we do that at the kickoff meeting on Monday?
Well, I don't know how many, so not all of the implementers get to come to the kickoff because, I mean, it is recorded. Sure. So I think probably, I don't think it's bad to do both.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people can't end up making it on the day, but I would be really interested to like take that further and let's ask people who are coming to the patient summary track. So they have something, which sections are they actually implementing?
A question on implementing sections is which sections are they implementing with structure, and or which sections are they implementing just as the narrative part of the section?
Yeah, that's a really good point. We should do that one as well. I mean, all this is on producer, right? Because the requirement on consumer is that you can consume at least all the sections defined, which is, those in the IPS document. And on producer, then you've got some shalls and then some shoulds and some mays, really, for production. And the same thing with like the structured content versus my section can be totally narrative. Like alerts could be just section text rather than a set of structured alert resources. So we could try and put that together, and maybe we do that as a standing kind of Connectathon question that we put that out. That could be really interesting.
Yeah, okay, that's helpful. I've got to do some Menti questions for Monday anyway, so I'll incorporate some of that feedback into some of those Mentis for Monday. We'll try it out on Monday, and then we can refine it further for the following week.
Charles?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, given that one of the goals is to start to capture coverage of what profiles people are supporting, just based on that last comment before from, I think it was David, about would it be worth splitting that up into supporting profiles using narrative versus supporting profiles using structured data?
Yeah, I've got that.
All right. Thanks, Heath. Thanks, Charles. Are there any other suggestions or I guess pieces of information that people think would be really important for us to keep progressing towards a first release of an Australian patient summary? All right, hearing nothing at the moment. We'll see what comes out of this connectathon and our next call. Oh, sorry, Mandy.
Yep, I just have one more thing that came to my mind. You know, there are always human errors. How can someone correct an error when it's on the system? Is there a section on how to correct things if there has been an error submission done on this kind of platform?
Actually, interestingly, they just recently there's been a new profile, a new IG created, which is called I can't remember if it's exactly called a patient correction or something correction IG, which allows you to be able to submit changes to what on a system. I don't know if that necessarily answers your question. There it is. Charles has posted it.
And on another scenario, at the last testing event, we actually had one vendor who was enabling the ability for patients themselves to make annotations to certain sections that was either generated or curated by system or curated by a provider, but it was giving the opportunity for the patient to not change it, but to annotate. So, you know, I guess correction or elaboration would be one way of a patient putting their 2 cents worth in around the information that's in a particular patient summary.
The reason I've mentioned that is because even in the clinical field, just a hypothetical scenario, almost real, a patient says that to one person, they don't have any allergies or any specific allergies to food. And then they kind of open up and say, oh, I can't have shells and stuff like that. And then on the system, it will go in as no allergies. And then actually the person does have an allergy. And then if they're going to put an annotation there, if the patient later on decides to put that annotation there, would that annotation be displayed as an important factor when it comes down to, for example, doing radiology? And to alert the radiologist that, okay, this person has got some allergies to iodine or some allergies to shells and blah, blah, blah. So the point is, it's about safety. It's about resolving errors, because once a person has the authority to make those changes, is there any way to correct them, not just by annotation, just actually in the system correction? And what processes do we need to have in place to do that?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously there's got to be functionality in the systems. What we're trying to do here is provide a standard structure for supporting that and the conformance profiles around it. And the section information extension that I'm alluding to as the way of annotations and potentially a way of recording corrections is marked as must support. And as a consumer of a patient summary, basically we have an obligation on the consumer that they should display. Now it is a should, but they shall handle it in some manner. So we've certainly got those sorts of structures. Obviously, functionally, systems need to utilize that mechanism and enable the ability to put annotations on all those sorts of things. But I think from the standards perspective, we've got structures that could support those sorts of scenarios.
Thank you so much.
Just to finish up this section, I would certainly just encourage or make a call out to those that may have a patient summary consumer or a system that plays a patient summary consumer roles. We've got a number of producers that have been attending, but we don't really have too many consumers. I think we only had one consumer attend our testing event last time, which was great, and he did a great job of connecting to our producers. But it'll be great to have another couple consumers out there as well. So if you're thinking about going down this route, from that would be a great opportunity, and we'd love to see you bring what you have, even if it's a prototype.
Thanks, Heath. Charles?
Just on that last point, Heath, we will be bringing a patient summary viewer as a consumer, as well as a smart health link generator.
Oh,
Awesome.
all right. I think we might end it there. We've got some of the feedback on some of the things, some of the pieces of information to collect in the connectathon, but overall, it seems like we're keeping these track scenarios, and we'll report back after the connectathon on what's come out of that. And so what we have in between this and closing up the meeting is a walkthrough of the patient summary composition profile. So what I'm actually going to do is swap that around. I'm going to do a quick what's our next agenda, and then I'm going to go through the AU patient summary composition profile and do a walkthrough of that. And I'll just double check at this point. Is there anything else that people need to bring up or have a question about in this meeting?
Yeah, I have a question about Inferno tests. Yeah, maybe it's not right time to discuss it, but we have a poll in Zulip. So and only I think 6 people replied there, but it's much more people on this call. Yeah, regarding the how are we going to validate the bundle? So should Inferno contain some operation test, or should for this connected on the just with ability to provide bundle as like a JSON without any HTTP based interaction? So I would like to hear thoughts from the community.
Okay, I've put that in the chat. Can people go have a look at that and vote?
Thank you.
No worries. Okay, next meeting is going to be usual business. This time we will approve minutes, both the minutes from this call and the one from the previous call. We'll go through the updates. By this point, we're expecting everyone to have voted, really, by the 5th of September. So we'll have some indication now on what our complete set of feedback is. We'll get a report back from the connectathon testing we've just talked about that we're going to do. And then we'll be voting on decisions. In between this call and the next one, there'll be an email coming out from me that will tell you the list of issues. There'll be, depends, maybe 4 to 8 that are ready for us to consider because we will have done the triage, the AU Core TDG co-chairs, and are now out to the community to consider, and we will vote on in the next call. And that's really going to be our pattern for the next few meetings, is that we will announce both through the usual emails you get from us, which I think are something like minutes plus next meeting. That will list out all the different JIRA topics. And we'll also post in Zulip what we're going to be voting on. And the request is that people go consider that and put comments on the JIRAs or reply, I guess, in Zulip itself if you have any concerns about that. And then we're going to be working through what those changes are going to be. Some are normative, some are adding guidance, some are just informative editorial fixes. There's really quite a broad range that is starting to come through. And it's going to be on us to make sure we just keep progressing that every fortnight. So that's the plan for the next call. Is there anything else people know about now that they want to add to that agenda? Not hearing anything, I'm going to move to AUPS composition for the time that we have available. And I'm going to do it off the build that is practically what we're going to publish in that 040 draft. You can either put your hand up if you have questions, or you can just ask them I might not see your hand up as I'm sharing screen. I just check. Everyone can see the screen and the FHIR IG. Yeah?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, we're going to start from the top this time. So we're going to go from here, and we're actually going to walk through, really starting from also talking through the obligations. There's quite a few differences than when we first started this journey. All of those differences have come in through IPS, which has moved to make a number of enhancements and clarifications. So from the AUPS composition profile, we are deriving from AU base. And just quickly, for those of you who weren't there for our conversation on profiling approach, what we tend to do in Australia, and by tend to, it's the preferred approach because it's the most efficient at bringing in the Australian localizations from AUCDI, is we take this approach where we have a use case profile that we derive from the AU core profile if it exists. And in this case, there is none. So then we derive from the AU base profile if it exists, and there is one. So our AU patient summary composition profile derives from AU base, which derives from AU core. That's basically a specialization in UML terms. We inherit all the rules going down to get to this profile. And then we manually apply the rules from IPS into our profile for AUPS composition. Richard.
I think you just said that AU base derives from AU core.
I think I said the words core because we talk about the core FHIR standard, and I might have said AU core or just A core. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
No.
It misled me, but I realize now that it was foolish of me to be. It was clumsy of me to be misled by that. Okay.
I think it's quite reasonable. AU patient summary composition, going back to the profile, derives from base. Base itself derives from the core FHIR standard. There is no profile for composition in the AU core spec. I probably don't expect there to be. There will be a document reference and probably a bundle in future to close up some of our gaps in access. But I don't know about composition. There's not really a lot of drive for interactions at a composition level. Though that's a sideline topic to what I'm about to walk through. So what I'm going to show you is going to be the differential, as in the changes we have made on top of the AU-based profile. Almost all of these are from IPS. Some have been in our meetings where we've made some principal decisions around how profiles work in AU patient summary. This first one is about meta.profile. I'm going to do quite a check here. Who is familiar with meta profile? Like, pop your hand up in Zoom. All right, I'm checking that's coming up to 5. All right, let's just cover a little bit of information. We won't stop this profile walkthrough just at this meeting. We'll keep going through the other calls because this one is critical. This is the critical profile for how does all of patient summary come together. So meta.profile, it's optional and it's a may obligations and may in general is included in a HL7 specification because we want to draw people's attention to it because it's potentially relevant. Theoretically, everything that's not mentioned is may. So this is a may able to populate, even though we don't say it here because we don't say it. But this is put in IPS to draw people's attention to it. And it's put in IPS to draw people's attention to it to say this is where you can do a conformance claim to a specific patient summary. So this is where we would expect, if there's a business reason to do so, and I'll just click on that because there's further descriptive information. You can say, like, which version of this, and you can have multiple. You can say that my thing conforms to IPS 200 and AUPS 100 and list out a number of jurisdictions. This can potentially drive some of the RESTful behavior of $doc or other operations who have a profile parameter to generate specifications or find specifications, because this, I guess, is the canonical identifier for the specification. Basically, this says that's an AU patient summary version 1. It's optional. It is absolutely not required, but it's been highlighted as a must support and a may because of its potential relevance for a whole number of RESTful interactions. So that's something that has been brought in from IPS.
No, there's no obligation on a consumer to be able to do anything to it or with it.
Yes, I know, that's quite interesting, isn't it? Heath, do you have any background knowledge on why there's only a may producer obligation?
No, I don't actually.
We can raise that later, I think, to the IPS group on why there isn't like a may handle.
Well, I would think that, I mean, what is a consumer going to do? If somebody's got a value in there and you know something to do with it, you can say, oh, they're claiming this, then what am I going to do with it? Well, if it's important to me, I'll validate it anyway. If it's not important to me, then I'll treat it without validation. So I'm not sure there's a lot of work for a consumer to do with it anyway. About the only useful thing a consumer could do is to say to the person who sent it, saying, you made a false claim, but I know how to process it anyway. But that's a pretty edge sort of scenario to put into the specification. So I think it's quite reasonable that they don't have an obligation on the consumer, but I think it winds up, I wanted to highlight that people writing consumers don't actually have to worry so much about this particular element, though it could be useful to them.
Would that be related to any insurance further on? So
It's basically an ability. When you create a resource instance, you can say, this resource instance actually complies with that profile. It's information for your purposes, and I've said it. And then when you receive a thing that claims conformance, if it's really important to you, you need to validate it yourself. And if it's not super important to you, then it's not a lot of information.
Okay. And any part of this going to be AI controlled? As in populated? Well,
that's not up to us. We define conformance rules. How people actually populate, whether that's direct authoring or other things, is not something that we can have any controls on in this group.
AI in this sense would just be a tool to help you populate it, or just be a tool to help you read it. And so to that extent, from our perspective, it's just another tool, and the fact that it's AI is not special.
Yeah, but then you know, this is what I'm studying. I'm studying digital health, and I am getting some knowledge. And there are areas that are very gray, and there are areas that kind of like it seems kind of noticeable, but when you look deep into it, they can make major situations that it's going to be, you know, when you're designing something, if you get loopholes, then you're going to get bugs. If you know, in the term of people who are there with the software design, and this is what I'm trying to learn. And if you get bugs, it's going to be problematic in later on. So please forgive me my questions. I am still learning, and I don't want to open my mouth when I don't know exactly. But yeah, it just came to my mind, and I appreciate your patience with my questions. I'm very grateful.
There are probably other people in the meeting with similar questions.
I'm just going to, as chair, bring it back because we've only got 2 more minutes left to this particular element. And then we'll go to Brett and then Heath.
Yeah, I was just going to, I mean, I think profile assertions are really just that, assertions, and there's no guarantee anyone's validated it to make that assertion. There's no guarantee that the content is valid. So it's really more just an indicator that there's some intent there. And it is optional anyway. So it is something that you can't rely on anyway. So it may be that, yeah. So I think it has limited utility unless you have some guarantees and agreements between parties, really.
Yeah, that's where the question comes in, with that people making a guarantee or people working on behalf of somebody else, and these are like, this is what you guys are doing. I am so much grateful, and I'm really thankful, but you just sometimes need to make that kind of, have this into areas where if there is a problem, or it's a bug, or if it's a override, you know, with the security issues and blah, 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 that you would have pathways to segregate it and kind of manage it without affecting the whole system later on. Because if once it's published or when it's in, then yeah, it's kind of going to be tricky, I guess. Well, this is what my understanding is, but I'm still learning.
Heath?
So this is, as its parent indicates, it's purely metadata. It is infrastructural. It's related to how FHIR works, etc., and in particular around validation. So it's really indicating, it's like an XML schema tag to basically say, this is the structure that I'm saying that I'm complying with. However, as Danielle mentioned, there are IPS recommended operations that are defined in other IGs. We haven't dictated these yet in Australia in this IG that do use this profile. So the $.ref is using the profile to say, give me a the latest patient summary with this profile. The dollar summary also has the ability to do that as well. So I'm not interested in IPS. When I call the dollar summary, I don't want an IPS structure. I want an AUPS structure. So that's how it is being used in some of these other cases. So more so probably in the $.ref, because it is actually a filtering mechanism when you're actually asking for particular patient summaries of a particular profile. So no direct implication at the moment, but it could do in the future, and hence why it's a may.
Understood.
All right, we're going to close that conversation there. We got through one element. Good, you know, yes, we're there. And that's come to the end of the meeting for today. Is there any other comments or questions for people before we close up? And our next call will be as per this agenda, noting what I've not put on here is a continuation of the composition walkthrough, and I think we should keep going. In fact, actually, I'll just double check. Hands up, who wants to keep going, walking through all the composition elements whenever we get a space in a meeting to do so?
I was thinking next meeting, we probably get an update from the Connectathon.
No, we will. We will still do the items on screen.
There it is.
Of a
Sorry, I'm
Connectathon
blind.
update. This is a, I think as a standing item, I'm proposing it's important for us to continue to discuss every element in the composition, why it's there, what the obligation does, and if we have any particular questions or things we want to do about it. So that's my suggestion. All right, I can see enough hands that seems worthwhile. So while we're going through ballot reconciliation and that gets prioritized, let's have a standing item that we keep coming back to composition and just talking about what all of these elements do and what the constraints are in terms of a patient summary context. And with that, we're going to close it here today. Thanks everyone for your time.
Great, thanks. Great meeting.
Thank you.
for
Bye.
having me. Just if it's off record or it's on record,